Welcome back. Welcome to CMN 103. My name's Gail Crimmins. Today we're going to be talking about developing connections for an online presence, creating a social presence online. And obviously one thing that's been a kind of common theme, if you like, I hadn't intended it to be like this, but one of the common themes that have emerged through the conversations that we've had over the last few weeks has been this importance of presenting yourself to potential collaborators, potential employers, potential people that might commission your work, peers. You're just being out in those environments. Phil Graham was talking about that being your ecosystem. So I like that analogy because I don't want us to be thinking of networks in this way of using people to your own career advantage. I like the idea of cultivating an ecosystem, cultivating a series of connections, if you like. So today when I'm talking about this now, and we're going to be talking about developing connections, that's what I mean, how you can use social media and how you can use Task 3 in particular in terms of developing a social digital profile, a digital presence, if you like, how you can use that to really engage with other people, make connections, showcase who you are and what you can do, what you'd like to do. But also be aware of the power of that for your potential kind of work opportunities. So today's lecture is called Developing Connections and an Online Profile in the Creative Industries. Welcome. Today's lecture is going to be a little bit different to normal. You know, as normally when I say normal, not normal as a normal lecture is, where somebody stands in a lecture theatre with a sort of pulpit, if you like, in front of them and speaks to a series of PowerPoints to 100 people in the auditorium. Our lecture series hasn't been like that. It's been about a conversation, me engaging with these key concepts in the creative industries, you engaging with those and the readings and your tutorial activity, etc. And we've also been really blessed in that we've had these amazing guests that have been able to tell us about their perspectives and their experiences, and as well as their disciplinary kind of knowledge within music or drama or creative writing, screen media, etc. Today's a little bit different because I'm going to be referring to a series of slides. So I'm going to be talking to you like this sometimes, and sometimes there's going to be a screen as there would be in a lecture. The research shows that social networks are central to career development. So when we're talking about social networks, we are talking about Facebook and Instagram and some of those ways in which you ordinarily meet, maybe, and connect with friends. But we're talking about how they can be used to nurture your ecosystem of connections for work and to place yourself within that in the creative industries. And there are three main advantages to having a social media presence, a digital presence. And these are discussed in the slide. Coe in 2000 stated that creative industry workers use networks as a method of finding employment. That allows you to manage the unease related to job insecurity and to enable new cooperative endeavours. So don't dismiss this as something that is just used. Don't dismiss social media as something that's just used to socially connect or to connect with people who have similar political views to you. It's also an opportunity to grow your network and your connections that may offer work opportunities as well. The second statement there by Montazavi and Barami in 2012 suggests that network can increase development of creatives and nurture mentoring opportunities. So, you know, you may connect with people through your digital profile, through social media. And out of that, you might find an amazing mentor, somebody who says, this is how to do this, this is where to buy your product and why. This is an amazing piece of technology or software, you should try it. This is how you should charge out for your hourly rate. You know, whatever it is, a mentor can offer so much guidance and so much advice. So social media and these networks available to you might also be an opportunity to find a mentor. So the first advantage is, you know, it might actually allow you to find a job or an opportunity, a project opportunity. Secondly, it might allow you to find a mentor, somebody who's going to be able to support you and give you information and advice as you emerge in the career. And thirdly, Jackson in 2014 refers to an Australian National University study where he employed a study to look at graduate outcome data. And it showed that the importance of networking, and this includes capitalising on family, social and work contacts, to graduate career outcomes, had a 54% increase in the odds of job attainment if social networking strategies were used. 54%, you are doubling your chances of success and opportunities in the creative industries if you are using social networks to connect and to feed your ecosystem. There's some more information here which I think is really startling as well. Did you know that at least 60, and in the creative industries this is often greater, but at least 60% of jobs are never advertised? You're not going to find them in seek.com.au. You're not going to find them in behance.net, in any of these kind of more specialised, industry-specific repositories for work, etc. How are you going to find them then? If there are 60%, you're going to find them because they are through connections, through people that you know. I'm just going to tell you a story. Okay, you know that I do this. I'm going to go back, actually. I don't think I've ever told you this story, so I'm going to go back to a time when I was just 27 and I was a physical theatre performer, which meant that I had to use my body to perform, and I was very agile and fit and strong because that was my instrument of communication. And I had a really bad back accident. So I was putting a large piece of set into a skip because it was the end of the tour. So we'd been touring, we'd been involved in a piece of theatre that had toured nationally, and we were at the end of the tour and some parts of the set were no longer going to be needed and used. And it's appalling to think that we would throw these things away, but we did. We are talking about well over 20 years ago. So I was throwing this piece of set into this skip, and I don't know whether it was the pulling into the skip or the retrieving my body afterwards, the standing up, and it felt like it happened afterwards, but I very badly damaged my back, which meant that I could no longer perform. So I remember sitting in the doctor's surgery actually and thinking, I don't know what else I'm going to do. And he said, you'll just have to retrain, as if it was the easiest thing to do, because I had always been a performer and I didn't have another set of skills. And not only that, I was quite physically disabled at the time. So it's not like I could, I'll just retrain and do something else. I was bedridden for a lot of the time. Eventually, I had been at university, I had trained with another woman performer, and we weren't in the same academic year. She was 2 years above me, but there were only ever 20 students in the cohort of performers that I trained with. But she was in the third year when I was in the first year, so I knew her vaguely. I knew her through performances. I would watch her performances, she would watch ours. But we happened to be in the same city, and we'd bumped into each other a few times. We'd both gone to see pieces of theatre or gone to art galleries and various things, and we'd bumped into each other and had a few conversations. Anyway, I had this big accident and I didn't know what to do. And a couple of months later, this woman knocked on my door quite literally and said, I'm directing a piece of youth theatre, and I know that you can't really, get up and demonstrate stuff at the moment, but did you want to just come along and be a third eye or an outside eye? And that role is where somebody sits outside of the director's role and watches what's going on and offers critique. Where is there a dip in the energy? Where in the performance does something need to happen, whether that's a piece of movement or a song, or what can we not hear? Is there any loss of diction? Whatever it is. So the outside eye is a critique, if you like, or somebody who looks at the performance that's being developed. And I said, yes, okay. And I did that for a couple of weeks, and I couldn't drive at that point, so she would literally physically drive to my we call them flats in the UK, but you call them units here. She would drive to my flat and she would pick me up and she would take me to the rehearsal space, and I would sit at the back of the theatre and I would just take notes, and at the end of a rehearsal I would just give my impression of what was going on. And I did that for quite a while, probably more than a few weeks, probably a few months. And then after a couple of months, she was inviting me to go along to the conservatoire where she was teaching and co-teach with her, and other university places and colleges where she was directing or teaching. And so I did that, and I did that for quite a few months, and I wasn't being paid for it, but I was just really grateful to be able to use some of my knowledge and to get out of the house and to start getting physically well, which is what I was doing through this process also. After a few months, you'll have to bear with me here, she was an amazing woman, but she also had she had an interesting approach to life. And after a couple of months, she was just kind of a little bit bored of what she was doing and needed a break, and said, I'm just going for a three-week break to an ashram in India. Can you just look after my classes and my directing projects while I'm gone? And I was a bit nervous because I wasn't sure my back was going to hold up, but I said yes. And I did that, for 3 weeks, and I was really enjoying it. I was teaching, I was directing. I wasn't very physically able, but I could demonstrate to a certain extent, and I was able to walk at this point. Anyway, I did that for 3 weeks, and the phone rang, and I answered the phone, and it was Deb again saying, I'm not coming back. Will you see this semester out? Will you complete my commitments to the semester for me? I said, yeah, of course. And so I did that. And then the following semester and the following project, etc., the same people that I was working with rang me and said, I understand Deb's not in the country, but we really enjoyed your work, and the students said this about you, or whatever it was, or the audiences said that. Can you come and take on the next project? Why am I telling you that story? I'm telling you that story because I got my work through word of mouth. I got my work through somebody I knew. I was shouldered out. But she had to know me and my work before I could do that. So you have to be out performing your skill, whether that's as a filmmaker, as a musician, as a writer. You have to be showcasing you and your work for people to know who you are, to recognize your ability, your capacity, your talent, and to think of you when a project or an opportunity arises. Because statistically, and I'm talking about all the world of work here, 60% of work is never advertised. 60% of jobs are never advertised. In the creative industries, it's more like 80 to 90%. So make sure that you are, showcasing who you are, what you can do, both through a physical presence, by physically performing, creating, being at somebody's gallery opening, making yourself known to people, but also showcasing your work digitally as well. They need to know who you are. Okay, so that's what today's focus is, and this is why task 3 as it is. This is why I want you to create a digital profile so that you can extend your connections socially, because we know that opportunities arise that way. So I'm just going to show you the next slide. So that relates to the fact that 60% of jobs are not advertised, and between 80 to 90% of university graduates only apply for jobs that are advertised. So there's a disconnect there, isn't there? There's this disconnect between what is available and how graduates are applying for a very small percentage of work that's available. I'd like you to be innovative and creative and looking for opportunities outside of what are advertised positions. So if we go to the next slide now, it looks like a bit of a jump, but I'll explain what I mean by disciplinary agility. If you have a look at the slide there are seemingly incongruous sets of skills or knowledge or disciplines there that are set next to one another. And this relates to the fact that you should have interests that are both within your disciplinary field. So if you're a filmmaker, you really ought to be interested in film. If you're a script writer, you should really be interested in narrative and scripts and characters. If you are a drama student, you really should be interested in emotion and character and narrative and the healing process of drama, what drama can do as a form of expression, as a way of giving voice to communities and individuals, and so I could go on. So you need to have a passion and an interest in your disciplinary field, but you should also cultivate interests outside of that, because we know through numerous studies that it's people that have vastly diverse interests that are most successful, and it's the combination of those two sets of interests that makes you unique and makes you very, very attractive in terms of employability, makes your contribution significant. So when Professor Graham was here, and he was talking about, he was talking about a number of things, and I just want to revisit the know your value bit. Just remember that, know your value. Don't squander. But he was also talking about, being you, backing yourself, being authentic. And we've talked before as well about combining, if you like. When I was talking with Rieta Scheepers, we were talking about combining passion with craft and skill. And that's what we mean by having this disciplinary agility. So don't have just one set of knowledges and one set of skills. Broaden that and make sure that you're interested in things and you can bring those two things together. That means having that disciplinary agility. Now, if you have a look at the number of connections here that somebody who has one disciplinary focus can create, it's relatively limited in comparison to this next set of information, or this next slide, where you've got the number of connections that can be created through these transdisciplinary ties is doubled. So if you have an interest in archaeology, and you also have an interest in salsa dance, you're going to have two sets of networks. It's rare that most people that go salsa dancing are also going to be the mates that you go digging with on a Sunday. You'll actually really increase your network if you have more than one interest, if you have two interests. So you'll have your disciplinary peers, the people that you're currently studying CMN 103 with, that you're studying perhaps other disciplinary focus courses with. But then if you have a life outside of that, where some of you are going to be interested in other things, maybe it's photography, maybe it's dancing, maybe it's pottery, you're going to make connections through those other interests, and they multiply the connections that you have, and each of these becomes a potential opportunity for work. When you know somebody and you can vouch for them, you're more likely to put them up for a job. Now, the reason that I was relatively successful in my field was because when I committed to a project, when I committed to a job and I said yes, I would do it, I did it to the best of my ability every time, and I did it within budget and within time. So I didn't say yes to every gig or every job that I was offered, because I didn't want to let down the people that I had committed myself to and the projects I'd committed to. And it also meant that by saying yes to this project and doing it well, the people that I worked with on that project would all recommend me for future projects. So connections are really interesting and really important, and Phil talks about the fact that we need to nurture them. And that means that you give to your project, to that particular project fully, and you give well. And then you'll multiply these ties that you have. And look at this one. Look at this last slide in this section anyway. So these are your indirect ties. So these are your broader networks. These are the people. These are the friends of the friends. So you might dance with somebody who knows you very well, knows your caring nature, your passion, knows your commitment, and all of these amazing kind of qualities that I've no doubt you have. And they might recommend you to somebody else, and that becomes a weak tie. So you don't know them directly, but weak ties also create opportunities. So if you've got multidisciplines and you have a disciplinary agility, each of the ties, the close ties, the face-to-face, one-to-one connections you have will also multiply in terms of the weak ties that you have as well. So this is the way that networking or ecosystem cultivation works. Okay, and in terms of task 3, which we have talked about briefly in a separate video when I talked about the assessment item, one of the ways in which you might create your digital profile is through LinkedIn. So let's just have a look at these LinkedIn stats available. Now these are fairly old, and obviously they've increased since this, but it's worth looking at. In 2015, nearly 100% of graduate recruiters and employers used Google and social media as application screening tools. All recruiters and employers are using LinkedIn to find staff. So that's another reason that they're not advertising, because they're already doing their recruitment. They're already looking to see who is available with these skills in this particular geographical area or within this particular niche market. Who has these very specific skills that I'm looking for? Okay, so that's why having a LinkedIn profile is so useful. If we look more closely now at some of these statistics, 94% of recruiters use LinkedIn to vet candidates. The average number of connections the recruiters have on LinkedIn is 616, so you've got these loose ties and these close ties. There are currently 10 million jobs listed on LinkedIn, and that statistic was from 2017, so I dare say that there are even more now. There was a 40% increase in LinkedIn mail between recruiters and members between 2015 and 2017, and 65% of LinkedIn job postings requires a bachelor's degree. And those statistics were viewed in September 2017, so I think those statistics alone really should be persuading you to make sure that not only have you got a LinkedIn profile, but it's up to date, it's dynamic, that you've got examples of your work linked as media texts. Okay, you should be thinking really that this is a tool to showcase who you are, to make connections and to foster the connections that you have. This is interesting because that's what we know about what recruiters and employers are looking for and what they want. This is what we know about students, and again, it's slightly dated, but situate yourself in these stats. Where are you in terms of these stats? How well connected are you? So, 60% of students don't think of their teachers as being industry active. So you're not utilising us. You're not asking us questions about what you should be doing and how you should be working and who you should be networking with, and, asking us to mentor you or anything. You're not even thinking of us in terms of being industry active, but most of your tutors are industry active. So don't waste that resource. 30% of students have met, on average, only one employer in their field of interest. So what we mean by WIL there is work integrated learning. So 30% of you, or not you, but 30% of students that were surveyed had only met one potential employer. How do you think that you can increase that? By engaging in more work experience, by engaging in more internships, by volunteering, by making sure that you are at events and openings and performances where you are actually going to meet with and engage, interact with people who are potentially your employers or your collaborators of the future. Don't be one of the 30%. And finally, 92% of students wanted more information about how to improve their networks and their networking potential. So that's why we have designed CMN 103 to give you an opportunity to design and develop an online site. So this next slide puts the onus back on you. Networking, it starts with you. Very briefly, one of these last slides now, if the onus is on you, because you have to kind of do the connecting, the speaking with, telling people who you are, what you can do, what you want to do. This slide now just gives you a few tips on what you can do practically, especially if you're based on the Sunshine Coast. Okay, So you might join a creative art, design, gaming, music, media, business organisation in your area. You can do that today. You can Google who they are and you can enrol today. There's also the Sunshine Coast Creative Alliance if you're based on the coast, and the website details are there. You can follow creative professionals in your area today. So again, through LinkedIn, through all sorts of other ways, you can follow people who are in your area. You can subscribe to blogs, newsletters. You can keep up to date with what's happening in the industry in terms of trends, latest awards, buzzwords. Attend industry events and take notes. Introduce yourself to people. Ask questions. But this all requires you to actually move out of your comfort zone. Speaking to people that you've not met before can be quite uncomfortable, but they were in your position 5 years ago or 10 years ago. You know, they understand what it's like to be an emerging creative, and most established creatives are really supportive and really are open to working with, mentoring and offering opportunities for new emerging creative artists as well. I've certainly spoken to a lot of students who have been in your situation, and they said once you've had that first conversation, the second conversation is easier. So if you go back to that very first lecture that we had this semester, and I said, what are you good at? And how did you become good at it? You'll remember that it was through practice. So don't expect to be really experienced and comfortable making conversation and making connections with people that you don't yet know, because it can be quite uncomfortable when you're not used to it, but the more you do it, the more practice you are, the better you will be, but also the more you'll enjoy it, especially if you remember what Phil was saying. It's not about exploiting anybody. You know, you're not thinking of everybody as a dollar note. Not that you have dollar notes here, a dollar coin. But you're thinking of them as potential collaborators and people that you can work with. So really, you know, move away from the comfort of and the safety, if you like, of just restricting yourself to the people that you know. And the other thing is, the networks that you have now through your current hobbies and passions, through being part of a community, whether that's working as a babysitter, that's having teachers from previous schools and things, or people that you work part-time with, tell them who you are and what you want to do. Because if they don't know what you want to do, they're not going to recommend you to somebody that they know that's in that field. Okay, so connecting and networking is both a social online thing, but it also requires a face-to-face connection too. So next week we're going to talk a little bit more about how you might do this practically, and certainly in your tutorials we're going to be looking at some very practical tools and skills for creating a digital profile. But today we're really thinking about why. Don't be one of that, 90% chasing 40% of opportunities. Be a much smaller percentage looking for the larger opportunities, which are those face-to-face opportunities. Okay, I'll speak to you soon. Thanks, bye.